Oh my god. Nah, don't tell me that's what I did. Don't tell me that's what I did. Oh, don't tell me that's what I did. Oh, you fucking idiot. Never mind. So the last, I guess, 2 hours of reading, they're useless. I'm not doing that again, man. Suppose we're deleting this one. Delete forever. What a shame. I suppose you can read the book and find out. We're just reading a book though, so I don't see the real importance of it. Factories, mines, land, houses, transport, everything had been taken away from them, and these things were no longer private property. It followed that they must be public property, INGSA, which grew out of the earlier socialist movement and made permanent. Okay. But the problems of perpetuate. Yeah. See chapter 3. We've already read chapter 3. Uh-huh. Honestly, I'm really not gonna read a book within a book. Not like that. Yeah. Uh-huh. He's just saying the same stuff again and again and again. Below the come, below that come the dumb masses. So all these people, they fight amongst themselves. There's about 6 million of them, but whatever. And then below them come the dumb masses, who we habitually refer to as the proles, numbering perhaps 85% of the population, making you wonder why the 85% don't just take charge. Just saying. In the terms of our earlier classification, the proles are the low, or the slave population of equatorial lands, who pass constantly from conqueror to conqueror, are not permanent or necessary part of the structure. There we go. Makes a little bit more sense. In principle, membership of these groups is not hereditary. The child of the inner party parents is in theory not born into the inner party. Admission to either branch of the party is by examination, taken at the age of 16, nor is there any racial discrimination or any marked domination of one province by another. Jews, Negroes, South Americans of pure Indian blood are to be found in the highest ranks of the party, and the administrators of any area are always drawn from the inhabitants of that area. In their part of Oceania do the inhabitants have the feeling that they are a colonial population, ruled from a distant capital. Oceania has no capital, and its titular head is a person whose whereabouts nobody knows, except that English is its chief lingua franca, and newspeak its official language. It is not centralized in any way. Its rulers are not held together by blood ties, but by adherence to a common doctrine. It is true that our society is stratified, and very rigidly stratified on what at first sight appeared to be hereditary lines. There are far less to and fro movement between the different groups than happened under new capitalism or even in the pre-industrial age. Between the two branches of the party there is a certain amount of interchange, but only so much as will ensure that weaklings are excluded from the inner party, and that ambitious members of the outer party are made harmless by allowing them to rise. Proletarians, in the practice, are not allowed to graduate into the party. The most gifted among them, who might possibly become nuclei of discontent, are simply marked down by the thought police and eliminated. But this state of affairs is not necessarily impermanent, nor is it a matter of principle. The party is not a class of old sense of the world, in the old sense of the word. It does not aim at transmitting power to its own children as such, and if there was no way of keeping the ablest people at the top, it would be perfectly prepared to recruit an entire new generation from the ranks of the proletariat. In its crucial years, the fact that the party was not a hereditary body did a great deal to neutralize opposition. The older kind of socialist, who had been trained to fight against something called class privilege, assumed that what is not hereditary cannot be permanent. He did not see that the continuity of an oligarchy need not be physical, nor did he pause to reflect the hereditary aristocracies have always been short-lived, whereas adoptive organizations such as the Catholic Church sometimes have lasted for hundreds of thousands of years. The essence of oligarchical rule is not father-to-son inheritance, but the persistence of a certain worldview and a certain way of life imposed by the dead upon the living. That's a deep, deep burn, innit? Gotta remember the next letter is A. Be right back. This chair's got a wonderful squeak, hasn't it? How are we enjoying the story so far? Is the story interesting? Is it fun? Is it good? Page 264. 130 fucking pages left. No, that's not going to help, is it? I need to click on this thing up here. A ruling group is a ruling group so long as it can nominate its successors. The party is not concerned with perpetuating its blood, but with perpetuating itself. Did I get you, you twat? Or was that my hair? Might be my hair. Who wields power is not important, provided that the hierarchical structure remains always the same. All the beliefs, habits, tastes, emotions, mental attitudes characterize the time are really designed to sustain the mystique of the party and prevent the true nature of present-day society from being perceived. Physical rebellion or any preliminary move towards rebellion is at present not possible. From the proletarians, nothing is to be feared. Left to themselves, they will continue from generation to generation and century to century, working, breeding, and dying, not only without any impulse to rebel, but without the power of grasping that the world could be other than it is. Right. Okay, they didn't understand the world as it was. They could only become dangerous if the advance of an industrial technique made it necessary to educate them more highly. But since military and commercial rivalry are no longer important, the level of popular education is actually declining. What opinions the masses hold or do not hold is looked on as a matter of indifference. They can be granted intellectual liberty because they have no intellect. In a party member, on the other hand, not even the smallest deviation of opinion on the most unimportant subject can be tolerated. A party member lives from birth to death under the eye of the thought police. Even when he is alone, he can never be sure that he is alone. Wherever he may be, asleep or awake, working or resting, in his bath or in bed, he can be inspected without warning and without knowing that he is being inspected. Nothing that he does is indifferent. His friendships, his relaxations, his behaviour towards his wife and children, the expression of his face when he is alone, the words he mutters in sleep, even the characteristic movements of his body are all jealously scrutinised. Not only any actual misdemeanour, but any eccentricity, however small, any change of habits, any nervous mannerism that could possibly be the symptom of an inner struggle, is certain to be detected. He has no freedom of choice in any direction whatever. On the other hand, his actions are not regulated by law by any clearly formulated code of behaviour. In Oceania, there is no law. Thoughts and actions which, when detected, mean certain death, are not formally forbidden, and the endless purges, arrests, tortures, imprisonments, and vaporizations are not inflicted as punishment for crimes which have actually been committed, but merely the wiping out of persons who might perhaps commit a crime at some time in the future. A party member is required to have not only the right opinions, but the right instincts. Many of the beliefs and attitudes demanded of him are not plainly stated, and could not be stated without laying bare the contradictions inherent in INSOC. If he is a person in naturally orthodox, good thinker, he will in all circumstances know without taking thought, what is the true belief or the desirable emotion. But in any case, an elaborate mental training undergone in childhood and grouping itself round the newspeak words, crime stop, black, white, and doublethink, makes him unwilling and unable to think too deeply on any subject whatever. The party member is expected to have no private emotions and no respites from enthusiasm. He is supposed to live in a continuous frenzy of hatred of foreign enemies and internal traitors, triumph over victories, and self-abasement before the power and wisdom of the party. The discontents produced by his bare, unsatisfying life are deliberately turned outwards and dissipated by such devices as the 2-minute hate, and the speculations which might possibly induce a sceptical or rebellious attitude are killed in advance by his early acquired inner discipline. The first and simplest stage of this discipline, which can be taught even to young children, is called, in newspeak, crime stop. Crime stop means the faculty of stopping short, as though by instinct. At the threshold of any dangerous thought, it includes the power of not grasping analogies, of failing to perceive logical errors, of misunderstanding the simplest arguments if they are inimical to INSOC, and of being bored or repelled by any train of thought which is capable of leading in a heretical direction. Crime stop, in short, means protective stupidity. There's a bunch of people out there like that, I think. But it is not enough. On the contrary, orthodoxy, in the full sense, demands a control over one's own mental processes as complete as that of a contortionist over his body. Oceanic society rests ultimately on the belief that Big Brother is omnipotent and that the party is infallible. But since in reality Big Brother is not omnipotent and the party is not infallible, there is no need for an unwavering, moment-to-moment flexibility in the treatment of facts. The key word here is black-white. Like so many newspeak words, the word has two mutually contradictory meanings. Applied to an opponent, it means the habit of impudently claiming that black is white, in contradiction of plain facts. Applied to a party member, it means a loyal willingness to say that black is white when party discipline demands this, but it means also the ability to believe that black is white, and more to know that black is white, and to forget that one has ever believed the contrary. The demands and continuous alteration of the past made possible by the system of thought which really embraces all the rest, and which is known in newspeak as doublethink. The alteration of the past is necessary for two reasons, one of which is subsidiary and, so to speak, precautionary. The subsidiary reason is that the party member, like the proletarian, tolerates present-day conditions partly because he has no standards of comparison. He must be cut off from the past. just as he must be cut off from foreign countries, because it is necessary for him to believe that he is better off than his ancestors, and that the average level of material comfort is constantly rising. But by far the more important reason for that readjustment of the past is the need to safeguard the infallibility of the party. It is not merely the speeches, statistics, and records of every kind that must be constantly brought up to date in order to show that the predictions of the party were all in all cases right. It is also that no change in doctrine or in political alignment can ever be admitted. For to change one's mind, or even one's policy, is a confession of weakness. For example, Eurasia or Eastasia, whichever, is the enemy today, and then that country must have always been the enemy. And if the facts say otherwise, then the facts must be altered. Thus, history is continuously rewritten. So this day-to-day falsification of the past, carried out by the Ministry of Truth, is as necessary to the stability of the regime as the work of repression and espionage carried out by the Ministry of Love. The mutability of the past is the central tenet of INGSOC. Past events, it is argued, have no objective existence, but survive only in written record and in human memories. The past is whatever the records and human memories agree upon, and since the party is in full control of all records and in equally full control of the minds of its members, it follows that the past is whatever the party chooses to make it. It also follows that though the past is alterable, it never has been altered in any specific instance, for when it has been recreated in whatever shape it needed at the moment, then this new version is the past, and no different past could have ever existed. This holds good even when, as often happens, the same event has to be altered out of recognition several times in the course of a year. At all times the party is in possession of absolute truth, and clearly the absolute can never have been different from what is now. It will be seen that the control of the past depends, above all, on the training of memory. To make sure that all written records agree with the orthodoxy of the moment is merely a mechanical act, but it is also necessary to remember that events happened in a desired manner. And if it is necessary to rearrange one's memories or to tamper with written records, it is necessary to forget that one has done so. The trick of doing this can be learned like any other mental technique. It is learned by the majority of party members, and certainly by all who are intelligent as well as orthodox. In old speak, it's called, quite frankly, reality control. In new speak, it's called doublethink, though doublethink comprises much else as well. Doublethink means the power of holding two contradictory beliefs in one's mind simultaneously, and accepting both of them. The party intellectual knows in which direction his memories must be altered. He therefore knows that he is playing tricks with reality, but by the exercise of doublethink he also satisfies himself that reality is not violated. The process has to be conscious, or it would not be carried out with sufficient precision. But it also has to be unconscious, or it would bring with it a feeling of falsity and hence of guilt. Doublethink lies at the very heart of INGSOC. Since the essential act of the party is to use conscious deception while retaining the firmness of purpose that goes with complete honesty, to tell deliberate lies while genuinely believing in them, to forget any fact that has become inconvenient, and then, when it becomes necessary again, to draw it back from the oblivion for just so long as it is needed, to deny the existence of objective reality, and all the while take account of reality which one denies. All this is indispensably necessary. Even in using the word doublethink, it is necessary to exercise doublethink, for by using the word one admits that one is tampering with reality. By a fresh act of doublethink, one erases the knowledge, and so on indefinitely. With the lie, always one leap ahead of the truth. Ultimately, it is a means of doublethink that the party has been able to, and may, for all we know, continue to be able to, for thousands of years, to arrest the course of history. All past oligarchies have fallen from power either because they ossified or because they grew soft. Either they became stupid and arrogant, failed to adjust themselves to changing circumstances, and were overthrown, or they became liberal and cowardly, made concessions when they should have used force, and once again were overthrown. They fell, that is to say, either through consciousness or through unconsciousness. It is the achievement of the party to have produced a system of thought in which both conditions can exist simultaneously, and upon no other intellectual basis could the dominion of the party be permanent. If one is to rule and to continue ruling, one must be able to dislocate the sense of reality. For the secret of rulership is to combine a belief in one's own infallibility with the power to learn from past mistakes. It need hardly be said that the subtlest practitioners of doublethink are those who invented doublethink, and know that it is a vast system of mental cheating. In our society, those who have the best knowledge of what is happening are also those who are furthest from seeing the world as it is. In general, the greater the understanding, the greater the delusion. The more intelligent, the less sane. One clear illustration of this is the fact that war hysteria increases in intensity as one rises in the social scale. Those whose attitude towards the war is most nearly rational are the subject peoples of disrupted territories. To these people, the war is simply a continuous calamity, which sweeps to and fro from their bodies like tidal wave. Which side is winning is a matter of complete indifference to them. They are aware that a change of overlordship means simply that they will be doing the same work as before for a new master who will treat them in the same manner as the old one, and slightly more favoured workers, whom we call the pros, are only intermittently conscious of the war. When it is necessary, they can be prodded into frenzies of fear and hatred, but when left to themselves, they are capable of forgetting for long periods that the war is happening. Yeah, it is in the ranks of the party, and above all of the inner party, that the true war enthusiasm is found. World conquest is believed in most firmly by those who know it to be impossible. The peculiar linking together of opposites, knowledge with ignorance, cynicism with fanaticism, it is one of the chief distinguishing marks of oceanic society. The official ideology abounds with contradictions, even when there is no practical reason for them. Thus the party rejects and vilifies every principle for which the socialist movement originally stood, and it chooses to do this in the name of socialism. It preaches a contempt for the working class, unexampled for centuries past, and it dresses its members in a uniform which, at one time peculiar to manual workers, was adopted for that reason. It systematically undermines the solidarity of the family, and it calls its leader by a name which is a direct appeal to the sentiment of a family loyalty. Even the names of the four ministries by which we are governed exhibit a sort of impudence in their deliberate reversal of the facts. The Ministry of Peace concerns itself with war, the Ministry of Truth with lies, the Ministry of Love with torture, the Ministry of Plenty with starvation, and these contradictions are not accidental, nor do they result from ordinary hypocrisy. They are deliberate exercises in doublethink, for it is only by reconciling contradictions that power can be retained indefinitely. In no other way could the ancient cycle be broken. If human equality is to be forever averted, if the high, as we have called them, are to keep their places permanently, then the prevailing mental condition must be controlled insanity. But there is one question which, until this moment, we have almost ignored. Why? Why should human equality be averted? Supposing that the mechanics of the process have been rightly described, what is the motive for this huge, accurately planned effort to freeze history at a particular moment of time? Here we reach a central secret. As we've seen, the mystique of the party, and above all the inner party, depends upon doublethink, but deeper than the lies of the original motive, the never-questioned instinct that first led to the seizure of power and brought doublethink, the thought police, continuous warfare, and all the other necessary paraphernalia into existence afterwards. This motive really consists. Winston became aware of silence, as one becomes aware of a new sound. It seemed to him that Julia had been very still for some time. She was lying on her side, naked from the waist upwards, with her cheek pillowed on her hand and one dark lock trembling across her eyes. Her breast rose and fell slowly and regularly. "Good morning, Julia. It's me, Joe. Just wanted to let you know. Getting to look at you and talk to you." No answer. "Good morning, Julia." It's me, Joe, just driving to work. Trying to wish you a great day. No answer. She was asleep. He shut the book, put it carefully on the floor, laid down, and pulled over the cover over the both of them. He reflected not learned the ultimate. He reflected that he had still not learned the ultimate secret. He understood how. He did not understand why. Chapter 1, like Chapter 3, had not actually told him anything that he did not know. It had merely systematized the knowledge that he possessed already. But after reading it, he knew better than before that he was not mad. Being in a minority, even a minority of one, did not make you mad. There was a truth and there was an untruth. And if you clung to the truth, even against the whole world, you were not mad. A yellow beam from a sinking sun slanted through the window and fell across the pillow. He shut his eyes. The sun on his face and the girl's mouth body touching his own gave him a strong, sleepy, confident feeling. He was safe. I told you she was barely. Everything was all right. He fell asleep murmuring, "Sanity is not statistical. Sanity is not statistical. Sanity is not statistical." With the feeling that this remark contained in it a profound wisdom. When he awoke, it was with a sensation of having slept for a long time, but a glance at the old-fashioned clock told him that it was only 20:30. He lay dozing for a while. So it's only been like an hour. An hour and a half, maybe, he's been asleep. Then the usual deep lunch singing struck up from the yard below. It was only an hopeless fancy. It passed like an April day, like a word, and dreams they stood, have stolen my heart away. The drivelling song seemed to have kept its popularity. You still heard it all over the place, and it had outlived the hate song. Julia woke at the sound, stretched herself luxuriously, and got out of bed. "I'm hungry," she said. "Let's make more coffee." "Let's make some more coffee." Damn, the stove's gone out and the water's cold. She picked up the stove up and shook it, and there's no oil in it. We can get some from old Carrington, I expect. The funny thing is, I made sure it was full. I'm going to put my clothes on, she added. It seems to have gotten colder. Winston also got up and dressed himself. The unfatigued voice sang on. They say that time heals all things. They say you can always forget. But the smiles and the tears across the years, they twist me heartstrings yet. And as he fastened the belt on his overalls, he strolled across to the window. The sun must have gone down behind the houses now. It was not shining into the yard any longer. The flagstones were wet as though they had just been washed, and he had the feeling that the sky had been washed too. So fresh and pale was the blue between the chimney pots. Tirelessly the woman marched to and fro, corking and uncorking herself, singing and falling silent, and pegging out more diapers, and more and yet more. He wondered whether she took in washing for a living or was merely the slave of her 20 or 30 grandchildren. Julia had come across to his side. Together they gazed down at a sort of fascination at the sturdy figure below. As he looked at the woman in her characteristic attitude, her thick arms reaching up to the line, a powerful male-like buttocks protruded, it struck him for the first time that she was beautiful. It had never occurred to him that the body of a woman of 50, blown up to monstrous dimensions by childbearing, then hardened and roughened by work till it was coarse in the grain like an overripe turnip, could be beautiful. It was so. And after all, he thought, why not? A solid, contourless body, like a block of granite, and the rasping red skin bore the same relation to the body of a girl as the rose hip to the rose, as the hip of a rose. Why should the fruit be held inferior to the flower? She is beautiful, he murmured. She's fat, said Julia. Well, that's her style of beauty, said Winston. And he held Julia's supple waist easily encircled by his arm. From the hip to the knee, her flank was against his. Out of their bodies no child would ever come. This was the one thing they could never do. Only by word of mouth from man to man could they pass on the secret. The woman down there had no mind. She had only strong arms, a warm heart, and a fertile belly. He wondered how many children she had given birth to. It might easily be 15. She had hair momentary flowering, a year, perhaps, of wild rose beauty, and then she had suddenly swollen like a fertilized fruit and grown hard and red and coarse, and then her life had been laundering, scrubbing, darning, cooking, sweeping, polishing, mending, scrubbing, laundering. For the first, you already said laundering, right? Yeah, you already said like you can't put laundering twice in the same list. You can't. First for children, then for grandchildren, over 30 unbroken years, and at the end of it, she was still singing. The mystical reverence that he felt for her was somehow mixed up with the aspect of the pale, cloudless sky stretching away behind the chimney pots into interminable distance. It was curious to think that the sky was the same for everybody in Eurasia or East Asia as well as here. And the people under the sky were also very much the same. Everywhere, all over the world, hundreds of thousands of millions of people just like this. People ignorant of one another's existence, held apart by walls of hatred and lies, and yet almost exactly the same. People who had never learned to think, but who were storing up in their hearts and bellies and muscles the power that they would one day overturn the world. And if there was hope, it lay in the prose. Without having read to the end of the book, he knew that that must be Goldstein's final message. The future belongs to the prose. And he could be sure that when their time came, the world they constructed would not be just as alien to him, Winston Smith, as the world of the party. Yes, because at least it would be a world of sanity, where there is equality and there can be sanity. Sooner or later it would happen. Strength would change into consciousness. The prose were immortal. You could not doubt it when you looked at the valiant figure in the yard. In the end, their awakening would come, and until that happened, though it may be 1,000 years, they would stay alive against all the odds. Like birds passing from body to body, the vitality which the party did not share and could not kill. Do you remember, he said, the thrush that sang to us, that first day at the edge of the wood, when I couldn't get it up? He wasn't singing to us, said Julia. He was singing to please himself. Not even that. He's just singing. All right then, that's cool. The birds sang, the prose sang, the party did not sing, all around the world, in London and New York, in Africa and Brazil, and in the mysterious forbidden lands beyond the frontiers, in the streets of Paris and Berlin, in the villages and in the endless Russian plain of the bazaars of China and Japan, everywhere stood the same solid, unconquerable figure, made monstrous by work and childbearing, toiling from birth to death, and still singing. These lists of things that keep getting put in this fucking book, it really does get to me just a little bit. Whew. Oh, I've been pouring a drink. Bloody hell. What was that, half an hour? I was supposed to pour this ages ago. Right, smoke, drink, rest of the book to read. Here we fucking go. What page are we on? 277. Alright, we've gone through 10 pages. That's not bad. Ooh, there's a song now. I'm here, by the way. It's true, though. The proles, that's me and you. We're the proles, by the way. All the normal people. We're the proles. I don't care if you're a normal person and you have ideologies of other stuff. We're the ones that aren't in charge. We need to talk to each other. We need to. It's the people up top. They're the ones that have got to constantly dance. I mean, look at the Oscars when Will Smith slapped Chris Rock for telling a fucking joke. Or not even a joke, making a fucking good suggestion. You know what I mean? That'd have been cool. But yeah, he got offended by it and he did the thing. He was the, how dare you step outside of party lines? And no one knew how to react to it. Nobody. It was unfortunate. Out of those mighty loins, a race of conscious beings must one day come. You were the dead. Theirs was the future. But you could share in that future if you kept alive the mind as they kept alive the body, and passed on the secret doctrine that 2 + 2 makes 4. Now you've got to ask yourself, does 2 + 2 make 4? We are the dead, he said. We are the dead, echoed Julia dutifully. You are the dead, said an iron voice behind them. They sprang apart. Winston's entrails seemed to have turned into ice, and he left a little puddle on the floor. He could see that the white all around the irises of Julia's eyes. Her face had turned a milky yellow. The smear of rouge that was still on each cheekbone stood out sharply, almost as though unconnected with the skin beneath. I think this is that guy that went to the house with Aldrich. I think that's him. I think this is who it is. You are the dead, repeated the iron voice, because he knows where they live, you see. We was told that earlier. And it was behind the picture. It's behind the picture, breathed Julia. Behind the picture, said the voice. Remain exactly where you are. Make no movement until you are ordered. This is where they're getting instructions to do stuff. This is where they're getting instructions to do stuff. They was told they'd be told to do stuff randomly and without reason. Here we go. It was started. It was starting at last. They could do nothing except stand gazing into one another's eyes. To run for life, to get out of the house before it was too late, no such thought occurred to them. Unthinkable to disobey the iron voice from the wall. That's what I think. I think I know what this is. Oh. There was a snap as though a catch had been turned back, and a crash of breaking glass. The picture had fallen to the floor, uncovering the telly screen behind it. Now they can see us, said Julia. Now we can see you, said the voice. Shit, they've been found. Oh no. Does that mean they've been listening to him have sex and talk about all this bollocksy shit? Oh no. Stand out in the middle of the room, stand back to back, clasp your hands behind your heads, do not touch one another. They were not touching, but it seemed to him that he could feel Julia's body shaking, or perhaps it was merely the shaking of his own. He could not just stop his teeth from chattering, but his knees were beyond his control. These telescreens, by the way, they do work both ways, so it might be an order to go do something for the Brotherhood. There was a sound of a trampling boots below, inside the house and outside. The yard seemed to be full of men. Something was being dragged across the stones. The woman's singing had stopped abruptly. There was a long rolling clang, as though the washtub had been flung across the yard, and then a confusion of angry shouts which ended in a yell of pain. The house is surrounded. Oh, sorry. The house is surrounded, said Winston. Oh, leave it there for a minute. The big heart. Oh, God. Fucking heart's pumping. Heart's fucking pumping. Reckon I'll be okay? Oh no, now I'm replaying that fucking torture scene in my head. I'm not too sure what to believe now. Oh, that's mad. Okay, put that there. Next page. Douche. The house is surrounded. said the voice. He had Julia snap her teeth together. I suppose we may as well have said goodbye, she said. You may as well say goodbye, said the voice. And then another, quite different voice, a thin, cultivated voice, which Winston had the impression of having heard before, struck in. And by the way, while we're in the subject, here comes a candle to light you to bed. Here comes the chopper to chop off your head. Something crashed on the bed behind Winston's back. The head of a ladder had been thrust through the window and had burst in the frame. Someone was climbing through the window. There was a stampede of boots up the stairs. The room was full of solid men in black uniforms. With the iron-shod boots on their feet and truncheons in their hands, Winston was not trembling any longer. Even in his eyes, he barely moved. One thing alone mattered: to keep still and to not give them an excuse to hit you. A man with a smooth prize-fighter's jowl, in which the mouth was only slit, paused opposite. Only a slit paused opposite him, balancing his truncheon meditatively between thumb and forefinger. Doing that. Okay, whatever. Winston met his eyes, and feeling of nakedness with one's hands behind one's head and one's face and body all exposed was almost unbearable. The man protruded. The tip of a white tongue licked the place where his lips should have been, and then passed on. There was another crash. Someone had picked up the glass paperweight from the table and smashed it to pieces on the hearthstone. The fragment of coral, a tiny crinkle of pink, like a sugar rosebud from a cake, rolled across the mat. How small, thought Winston. How small it always was. There was a grasp and a thump behind him, and he received a violent kick on the ankle which nearly flung him off his balance. One of the men had smashed his fist into Julia's solar plexus. I believe it's there anyway. Basically just fucking thumped her in the chest. Doubling her up like a pocket ruler. It might be here. She was thrashing about on the floor, fighting for breath. Yeah, he's winded her. Winston dared not turn his head even by a millimetre, but sometimes her livid, gasping face came within an angle of his vision. Even in his terror, it was as though he could feel the pain of in his own body. The deadly pain which nevertheless was less urgent than the struggle to get back her breath. He knew what it was like, the terrible agonizing pain, which was there all the while but could not be suffered yet, because before all else it was necessary to be able to breathe. Then two of the men hoisted her up by the knees and shoulders and carried her out of the room like a sack. Winston had a glimpse of her face upside down, yellow and contorted, the eyes shut, and still with a smear of rouge on either cheek, and that was the last he saw of her. Ouch. He stood dead still. No one had hit him yet. Thoughts which came out of their own accord but seemingly totally uninteresting began to flitter through his mind. He wondered whether they had got Mr. Charrington. He wondered what they had done to the woman in the yard. He noticed that he badly wanted to urinate and felt a faint surprise because he had done so only 2 or 3 hours ago. He noticed that the clock on the mantelpiece said 9, meaning 21, but the light seemed too strong. I'll wait a second. Got a bit of wind and it won't come up. Ooh, I've got 20 minutes before I have to go. About right? Yeah, about 15 minutes. Would not the light be fading at 21 hours on an August evening? He wondered whether, after all, he and Julia had mistaken the time. He had mistaken the time, had slept the clock around and thought it was 20:30 when really it was not 8:30. Oh, he slept all night, but he did not pursue the thought further. It was not interesting. There was another, lighter step in the passage. Mr. Charrington came into the room. The demeanour of the black uniformed men suddenly became subdued. Something had also changed in Mr. Charrington's appearance. His eye fell on the fragments of the glass paperweight. "Pick up those pieces," he said sharply. I knew this motherfucker was dodgy. I knew this guy was dodgy. A man stooped to obey. The Cockney accent has disappeared. Oh, sorry, has it? Pick up those pieces, he said, sharply. The man stooped to obey. The Cockney accent had disappeared. Winston suddenly realised whose voice it was that he had heard a few moments ago on the telescreen. Mr. Charrington was still wearing his old velvet jacket, but his hair, which had been almost white, had turned black. Also, he was not wearing his spectacles. He gave Winston a single sharp glance, as though verifying his identity, and then paid no more attention to him. He was still recognisable, but he was not the same person any longer. His body had straightened and seemed to have grown bigger. His face had undergone only tiny changes and had nevertheless worked a complete transformation. The black eyebrows were less bushy, the wrinkles were gone, the whole lines of the face seemed to have altered, even the nose seemed shorter. It was the alert, cold face of a man of about 35. Of about 35. It occurred to Winston that for the first time in his life, he was looking at Big Brother. Oh, with knowledge at a member of the Fort Police. Shit. It's just a member of the Fort Police. Are you kidding me? No. I mean, it's still not good. New chapter. Or new chapter. Part 3. Chapter 1. He did not know where he was. Presumably, he was in the Ministry of Love. So, chapter 5 of this blows my mind. Chapter 5 is fucking incredible. He did not know where he was. Presumably, he was in a Ministry of Love, but there was no way of making certain. He was in a high-ceilinged, windowless cell with walls of glittery white porcelain. Concealed lamps flooded with cold light, and there was a low, steady humming sound which he supposed had something to do with the air supply. I think this is the whole thing. I think this is the thing. A bench or shelf just wide enough to sit on ran around the wall, broken only by the door, and at the end opposite the door, a lavatory pan with no wooden seat. There were 4 telescreens, one on each wall. There was a dull aching in his belly. It had been there ever since he had bundled him into the closed van and driven him away. But he was also hungry, with the gnawing, unwholesome kind of hunger. It might be 24 hours since he'd eaten. It might be 36. He still did not know. Probably never would know. Whether it had been morning or evening when they arrested him. Since he was arrested, he had not been fed. He sat as still as he could on the narrow bench with his hands crossed on his knee. He had already learned to sit still. If you made unexpected movements, they yelled at you from the telescreen, but the craving for food was growing upon him. When he longed for above all was a piece of bread. He had an idea that there were a few breadcrumbs in the pocket of his overalls. It was even possible, he thought this because of the time something seemed to tickle his leg. There might be a sizable bit of crust in there. In the end, the temptation to find out overcame his fear. He slipped his hand into his pocket. "Smith!" yelled a voice from the telescreen. 6097 Smith W! Hands out your pockets in the cells. He sat still again, his hands crossed on his knees. Before being brought here, he had been taken to another place which must have been an ordinary prison or a temporary lockup used by patrols. He did not know how long he had been there. Some hours at any rate. With no clocks and no daylight, it was hard to gauge the time. It was a noisy, evil-smelling place. They had put him into a cell similar to the one he was in now. A bit much. It's gone out. I'm just holding it now, aren't I? Right. But filthily dirty and at all times crowded by 10 or 15 people. The majority of them were common criminals, but there were a few political prisoners among them. He had sat silent against the wall, jostled by dirty bodies, too preoccupied by fear and pain in his belly to take too much interest in his surroundings, but still noticing the astonishing difference in demeanour between the party prisoners and the others. The party prisoners were always silent and terrified, but the ordinary criminals seemed to care nothing for anybody. They yelled insults at the guards, fought back fiercely when their belongings were impounded, wrote obscene words on the floor, ate smuggled food, which they produced from mysterious hiding places in their clothes, and even shouted down the telescreen when they tried to restore order. On the other hand, some of them seemed to be on good terms with the guards, called them by nicknames, and tried to wheedle cigarettes out of the spy hole in the door. That's cool. That's cool. The guards, too, treated the common criminals with a certain forbearance, even when they had to handle them roughly. There was much talk about the forced labour camps to which most of the prisoners expected to be sent. It was all right in the camps, he gathered, so long as you had good contacts and knew the ropes. There was bribery, favouritism, racketeering of every kind. There was homosexuality, prostitution. There was even illicit alcohol distilled from potatoes. So it's a Russian prison. The positions of trust were given only to common criminals, especially the gangsters and the murderers, who formed a sort of aristocracy. All of the dirty jobs were done by the politicals. Perfect. There was a constant come and go of prisoners, every description: drug peddlers, thieves, bandits, black marketers, drugs, prostitutes. Some of the drunks who were so violent, and the other prisoners had to combine to suppress them. An enormous wreck of a woman, aged about 60, with great tumbling breasts and thick coils of white hair, which had come down in her struggles, was carried in kicking, shouting, by 4 guards who had hold of her, one at each corner. They wrenched off boots on which she had tried to kick them and dumped her down across Winston's lap, almost breaking his thigh bones. The woman hoisted herself up and followed them with a yell of "fucking bastards." Then, noticing that she was sitting on something uneven, she slid off Winston's knees onto the bench. "Beg pardon, dearie," she said. "I wouldn't have sat on you, only the boggers put me here. They don't know how to treat a lady, do they?" She paused, patted her breasts, belched. "Pardon," she said. "I ain't myself quite." She leaned forward and vomited copiously on the floor. "That's better," she said, leaning back with closed eyes. "Ever keep it down? That's what I say. Get it off while it's fresh in your stomach, like." She revived, turned to have another look at Winston, and seemed immediately to take a fancy to him. She put a vast arm around his shoulder and drew him towards her, breathing beer and vomit into his face. "Ah, gross." "What's your name, dearie?" he said. "Smith," said Winston. "Smith," said the woman. "That's funny. My name's Smith, too. Why," she added sentimentally, "I might be your mother." Can you stop saying words where you gotta breathe like that? Are you kidding me? Fucking pack it in. She might, thought Winston, be his mother. She was about the right age and physique. She was probably and it was probable that people changed somewhat after 20 years in a forced labour camp. No one else had spoken to him to a surprising extent. The ordinary criminals ignored the party prisoners. The Polits, they called them, with a sort of uninterested contempt. The party prisoners seemed to be... Party prisoners are Polits then, got ya. The party prisoners seemed terrified of speaking to anybody, and above all speaking to one another. Only once, when 2 party members, both women, were pressed close together on the bench, overheard amid the din of voices a few hurriedly whispered words, and in particular a reference to something called Room 101, which he did not understand. It might be 2 or 3 hours ago that they had brought him here. The dull pain in his belly never went away, but sometimes it grew better and sometimes worse, and his thoughts expanded or contracted accordingly. When it grew worse, he thought only of the pain itself, and of his desire for food. When it grew better, panic took hold of him. There were moments when he foresaw the things that would happen to him with such actuality that his heart galloped and his breath stopped. He felt the smash of truncheons on his elbows and iron-shod boots on his shins. He saw himself grovelling on the floor, screaming for mercy, though through broken teeth. He hardly thought of Julia. He could not fix his mind on her. He loved her and would not betray her, but that was the only fact, known that he knew the rules of arithmetic. As he knew the rules of arithmetic. He felt no love for her, and he hardly even wondered what was happening to her. He thought oftener of O'Brien, with a flickering hope Brian might know that he had been arrested. The Brotherhood, he had said, never tried to save its members, but there was a razor blade. They would send the razor blade if they could. There would be perhaps 5 seconds before the guard could rush into the cell. The blade would be bitten into him, and a sort of burning coldness, and then even the fingers that held it would be cut to the bone. Everything came back to his sick body, which shrank, trembling from the smallest pain. He was not certain that he would use razor blades, even if he got the chance. It was more natural to exist from moment to moment, accepting another 10 minutes life when the certainty that there was torture at the end of it. Sometimes he tried to calculate the number of porcelain bricks in the walls of the cell. It should have been easy, but he always lost count at some point or another. More often he wondered where he was, and what time of day it was. At one moment he felt certain it was broad daylight outside, and at the next equally certain it was pitch black darkness. In this place he knew instinctively the lights would never be turned out. It was the place with no darkness. He saw now why O'Brien had seemed to recognize the illusion. In the Ministry of Love there were no windows. His cell might be at the heart of the building, or against its outer wall. He might have been 10 floors below ground or 30 above it. He moved himself mentally from place to place, and tried to determine by feeling of his body whether he was perched high in the chair or buried deep underground. High in the air or deep underground. There was a sound of marching boots outside. The steel door opened with a clang. A young officer, a trim black uniformed figure who seemed to glitter all over the place, all over with polished leather, and whose pale, straight face was like a wax mask, stepped smartly through the doorway. He motioned to the guards outside to bring in the prisoner they were leading. The poet Ampleforth shambled into the cell. The door clanged shut again. Shit, what have I done? Ampleforth made 1 or 2 uncertain movements from side to side, as though having some idea that there was another door to go out of, and then began to wander up and down the cell. He had not yet noticed Winston's presence. So I think it's just Winston in this cell. 290, that's easy to remember. So it's just Winston in this cell, I believe. This is after the original one that was packed with people. And now he's alone, I believe. And this guy's been put in there. Obviously, it's a trick. They've got to kill Ampleforth, or they've got to kill Winston. I don't think Winston's getting out of this. I don't think 1984 is a happy book. I don't think it ends well. But here's to hoping. Ah, 2 more minutes then I'll go. You reckon I could read another page? Nah, I've got to go. Get dressed and then bike back. Ugh. I'll be about 2 hours. I should be back by... It doesn't really matter what time, does it? Someone came by and liked the video and they're not here. They never said anything. What did they like? That's weird. There's the hour back. See ya.